Hi, this is Matt Burns from the University of Missouri, and with me today is Dr. Abby Allen, who's an assistant professor in special education at Clemson University. Thanks for being here, Abby.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So she has a cool article that we're going to discuss today, a study in Learning Disability Quarterly, and it's called The Effect of Morphological Awareness Intervention on Early Writing Outcomes. It's with Dr. Erica Lemke here at the University of Missouri. I'm really excited about this because morphology is an area that doesn't really get enough attention, in my opinion, and I know of no other studies that look at it in looking at early writing. So again, this was published in Learning Disability Quarterly. Is this out yet, Abby, or is this still just online?
I think it's just online, but I haven't checked.
Okay, so I was able to find it pretty easily through Google Scholar. If you have a hard time finding it, I'm sure Dr. Allen would be happy to share that with you if you
Yeah.
email.
Mhm.
So I want to ask you a question. We'll stop sharing this. Ask you a few questions. Let's start with, first of all, tell us about the intervention that you studied. What did you guys do?
Yeah, so there were 4 different activities, and we did these activities over about a 25-minute session, and we met 4 to 5 times per week, depending on the grade level. But the activities were, we would start with a listening activity, and so we would target a specific morpheme for that lesson. So like plural S or past tense, ED or ING, things like that. And so I would read a very short story, just a few sentences out loud, and the students would have to give me a thumbs up when they hear, like, if you hear a word that has S at the end, put your thumb up. So we would do that, each day that we would learn a new morpheme. Then we would do a word sort. So I would show them different flashcards that had words that either did have our affix for that day or did not have it. And so the little saying that we would have when they're deciding whether it's a yes or a no was say it, spell it, say it again. And so I would do it with them. So we would say the word, we would spell it out, and say it again. And then we'd say, did you hear ing in that word, or whatever the target was that day? So if yes, I heard it, then we'd put it in the yes pile. If we didn't hear it, we'd put it in the no pile. And these are just a few minutes for each activity.
Mhm.
Then the third one was say it another way, which is, if I basically taking the target morpheme for that day and attaching it to a word and changing the word and talking about how it changed the word meaning. So like if I wanted to say more than one dog in another way, how could I say that? How could I say more than one dog? And it would be dogs. So we would do that with a bunch of target words. And then the last activity was writing sentences with words that had our target morpheme for the day. And we would spend the bulk of our time talking about sentences, putting the practice words into a sentence, and then the kids would write it down in their little sentence book. And that was basically it.
So that's awesome. So pretty brief. How long did that take?
The whole session was about 25 minutes.
Okay, great.
Um, I would try to, decide ahead of time how long each section was going to take. And the
Mhm.
sentences probably took 10 to 15 minutes. So those first 3 activities were just kind of to get them in the zone and introduced to that morpheme that we were working on. But it was a 25-minute session.
Good. And the word sorts were done with word cards, correct?
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
just make those myself.
Oh, thank you. Awesome.
Yeah.
So after doing the intervention, what did you find? How did it turn out?
Well, not what I was hoping for. So I looked at a couple of different measures, a standardized spelling measure, a standardized writing sample. So these were all WJ, Woodcock-Johnson 3. And then I had a curriculum-based measure that was a sentence writing measure called Picture Word, where they had to write a sentence in response to a little picture with a word under it.
Mhm.
Those were given every week. And so I had like 12 data points from that, but the WJ, I only gave it pre and post test. And so essentially, I didn't see any significant effects on spelling or writing, but I also gave a receptive language measure. So can they follow directions? I just gave it to everybody, and a working memory measure. And I used those as covariates. So I wanted to see if we control for their language ability and their memory, do we get any results? And the answer was no, we didn't get anything significant. We also found that their spelling ability was different between, so there was an intervention group and a comparison group, and their spelling scores were different at pretest. So I used their spelling score as an additional covariate to make sure that what we were really picking up on was the effect of the intervention. But using those measures as covariates, I ended up not getting a significant effect. But I did get a decent effect size, meaning either my sample, I didn't have enough kids, or it wasn't long enough. So yeah, the disappointing, I have to admit, the result was we didn't get a significant result. But we did see some growth from pre-test to post-test. The kids that got the intervention did get better and faster with their sentence writing. It just wasn't showing up on the standardized tests that I gave.
Sure. And
Yeah.
how many kids were in the study? Total?
26. There were 26.
What, I'm sorry, I forgot to ask this. What age or grade group?
Second and third graders.
Second,
So they were all struggling writers. I screened like 11 classrooms to find kids that would qualify for the study, and ended up with 26.
Gotcha. When your effect sizes, I'm looking at them right now, are 0.4 to 0.75, 1 at 0.6, et cetera. So yeah, pretty good effects. That's the nature too of running the Woodcock-Johnson, those standardized norm reference tests. You don't see quick growth.
Yeah.
Effect size of 0.6.
Yeah, that was exciting. It just wasn't significant. So it could just be, I don't know, some other reason that wasn't the intervention. But yeah, the effect sizes were decent.
Good. So, so when you said the non-significance may have been some other reason other than the intervention, like too small of a sample size or something.
Yeah, that could be.
Good. Okay, good. Thank you. So based on that, do you recommend people use morphology more based on your results because of the effect sizes?
Yeah. So previous research has looked at morphological awareness, which is basically teaching prefixes and suffixes explicitly to kids. And most of the previous work at this age level, like grades 1 to 3, has been measuring word spelling and looking at effects in reading. If we teach kids these affixes, do they get better at recognizing them when they're reading? So in that respect, yes, like teaching morphemes and morphological awareness is helpful for spelling and other aspects of written language like reading. I think the reason we didn't see, besides sample size and everything, a possible reason why we didn't see a significant effect on their sentence writing was that the sentence writing part of the intervention wasn't as explicit. So my purpose in delivering the intervention was delivering these morphological targets, but we didn't spend like a lesson on how to write good sentences. It was just kind of wrapped into the activity. So I think being more explicit with sentence writing while using these morphological targets could have an interesting effect. Like that's what I want to look at next. So I wouldn't say don't use morphemes. Like you can absolutely use them. I would just be careful about what your intention is and what you're going to focus on while teaching morphemes to students.
Cool, that's awesome. And perhaps adding it as a component to a different type of intervention might be effective as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's been a lot of work out there in this grade level range that shows that kids' spelling does get better if you teach them this aspect of language and how to recognize words, and their reading comprehension gets better too. So yeah.
Sounds good. Great, thanks. And then we talked about sample size. What's one more limitation? Because this is science, there's always limitations. What's another limitation you might highlight from your study?
Yeah, the biggest one that bothered me the most was the length of the intervention. I only had my students for 5 weeks. I found a district that wanted to participate. My intention was to do 10 weeks. That was more in line with previous research with this age of kids. But we ran into, it was a spring semester, and we ran into state testing, and the third graders had to take it. And so administration politely asked if we could be done by the opening of that testing window. And so that left me with 5 weeks. So it's possible that a longer intervention, I might have seen better results along with more students.
I love the inside stories from applied research that a lot of people don't realize. Why did it run 5 weeks? Well, because the school asked us to stop because tests didn't start. Something that's
Yeah, and scheduling was an issue. The two grade levels had wildly different intervention times. So it's all these little things that you don't think about till you get into it. And
yeah,
yeah, it's just the nature of
yeah,
school-based research.
awesome, great.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you having this conversation. Thanks.
you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.